People think silence means peace, but silence can scream louder than anything. The morning I found out my life was about to change, I was standing in my kitchen barefoot, arguing with a toaster that refused to pop. That's how ordinary the moment was. No thunder, no warning, just burnt bread and a humming refrigerator. Then the phone rang. I remember thinking, who still calls this early? That should have been my first sign. My name is Loretta Mayfield. I'm 61 years old. A black woman born and raised in a small Mississippi Delta town where everybody knows your business or thinks they do. I buried my husband 12 years ago, raised my children right, and learned how to make peace with quiet. Or at least I thought I had. By the time I hung up the phone, my hands were shaking so bad I had to sit down at my kitchen table like my knees might give out. The doctor's voice still echoed in my ears, calm and careful, the way people talk when they're about to hand you something fragile. "Miss Mayfield, the test results are very clear." I laughed, out loud, a real laugh, because what else do you do when the impossible knocks on your door like it pays rent? I'd gone in thinking it was stress, fatigue. Hormones acting funny the way they do once you cross a certain age and your body starts making its own rules. I wasn't worried. I've lived long enough to know bodies ache, change, slow down. What I wasn't prepared for was this. I stared at the faded family photo hanging crooked above my sink, me, my late husband Samuel, and our kids back when my hair was jet black and life felt endless. I remember whispering he would not believe this. Neither did I. Outside, the world kept moving like nothing had happened. A pickup truck rattled past. Somebody's radio played old school soul down the street. My neighbor's dog barked at absolutely nothing like usual. And there I was, 61, widowed, respectable, invisible, suddenly standing at the edge of something I never asked for and didn't know how to refuse. I'd spent years shrinking my life down to something manageable: church on Sundays, volunteering at the community center, early mornings with coffee and late nights with memories I kept folded neatly in my chest. I wasn't reckless, I wasn't lost, I wasn't looking for trouble. But trouble, it seems, has a way of finding you anyway. And the worst part, somewhere deep under the fear, under the shock, under the Lord have mercy, what will people say panic, there was something else. A flicker, small, dangerous, alive. And once you feel something like that after years of silence, you can't unfeel it. That was the day my quiet life broke open. And I had no idea who was about to walk back into it or what this town was about to do when they found out. I didn't meet Caleb Turner looking for anything. That part matters. I met him on a Tuesday afternoon that felt like every other Tuesday I'd lived through for the last decade, slow, warm, and forgettable. The kind of day where time stretches so wide you stop noticing it move. I was at the Delta Community Pantry, shelving canned goods with my reading glasses sliding down my nose when I heard a voice behind me say, "Ma'am, you mind telling me where you hide the coffee donations? Folks been asking like it's gold." It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Not rushed, not loud, just easy, familiar in a way that made my shoulders relax before my brain could catch up. I turned around and saw a man who didn't belong to my routine. Mid-40s maybe, tall, broad shoulders softened by kindness instead of muscle. Skin kissed by the sun, not vanity. He wore a plain gray t-shirt and jeans that looked lived in, like he worked with his hands. His hair had just enough silver at the temples to tell the truth about his age, but his eyes, those eyes had stories. The kind you don't ask about unless you're ready to sit down. "Coffee's back left," I said, "next to the rice, and don't take more than your share." He smiled, slow and genuine, like he wasn't used to being warned. "Yes, ma'am," he said, "wouldn't dream of it." That should have been it. A moment. A smile, another stranger passing through my day, but fate doesn't work on schedules. Over the next few weeks, Caleb kept showing up, always volunteering. Always helpful, carrying boxes, fixing a broken shelf, listening more than he talked. Turns out he'd moved into town temporarily to help his uncle recover from a stroke. Didn't know how long he'd stay. Just knew he needed something steady to do with his hands and his mind. We talked in pieces, about food drives, about how small towns remember your worst mistake but forget your best intentions. About grief, lightly, respectfully, like two people circling a bruise without pressing it. I never told him my full story and he didn't tell me his. That was the beauty of it. No pressure, no expectations. Just conversation that felt human. One afternoon, as we were locking up the pantry, he said, "You ever notice how quiet gets louder the older you get?" I froze, because that sentence landed somewhere deep. "I notice," I said carefully. He nodded like he understood more than he let on. That was the first time he walked me to my car. The first time his hand hovered just for a second near the small of my back without touching. The first time I felt something stir that I thought had long since gone dormant. I went home that night irritated with myself. "Loretta, get a grip," I thought, rinsing a mug in the sink. "You're too old to be feeling like this." But feelings don't ask permission, and loneliness doesn't check your birth certificate. Still, I told myself it was nothing, just companionship, just warmth, just two grown people passing time. I didn't know yet that this man, with his quiet voice and steady presence, would be the one standing in the center of the storm that was already forming inside me. And I definitely didn't know that my body, my own body, had already started telling a story my heart hadn't caught up to yet. Some truths start whispering long before they shout, and mine was just getting warmed up. By the time I realized Caleb had slipped into my life, he was already there, not loud, not demanding, just present. He became part of my weeks the way habits do, quietly, without announcement. Wednesdays at the pantry, Saturdays helping old Mr. Jenkins fix his porch rail. Sundays sitting 3 rows behind me at church, always slipping out early like he didn't want to be noticed. I noticed anyway. It wasn't romance, not at first, it was comfort. The kind that sneaks up on you after grief has worn you thin and you've convinced yourself you don't need much anymore. We started talking longer, sitting on the front steps of the pantry after closing, sipping lukewarm bottled water and watching the sun slide down behind the grain silos. Talking about music, old songs, the kind your parents played on Sundays while cleaning house. Caleb liked blues, said it felt honest. I liked gospel, said it felt grounding. Somewhere between those two truths, something softened. I caught myself fixing my hair before heading out, choosing earrings instead of grabbing the first pair, wearing perfume again, just a dab, the same bottle that had been sitting untouched since Samuel passed. That alone scared me. Because once you start caring how you show up, it means your heart is waking up too. One evening, a storm rolled in fast, thick clouds, heavy air, thunder rattling windows like it meant business. The pantry lost power mid-sort, plunging us into dim emergency lighting and the smell of dust and rain. Caleb laughed, low and easy. "Guess that's our cue." We locked up and stood there for a moment, rain pounding the pavement so hard it felt like it might crack. "You want a ride home?" he asked. "Storm looks mean." I hesitated, not because I didn't trust him, but because saying yes felt like crossing an invisible line I'd been towing for weeks. Still, I nodded. The drive was quiet but not awkward, windshield wipers swishing, thunder rolling overhead. His truck smelled faintly like soap and coffee. When he pulled up in front of my house, rain still falling, neither of us moved right away. "Thanks," I said, "for the help today." "Anytime," he replied. Then softer, "You do a lot for people, Loretta. Don't forget to let folks do something for you too." That did it, because nobody had said that to me in years. I didn't invite him in, not then. But I stood in the rain a little too long after he drove away, heart thudding like I'd just run a mile. That night I slept badly, dreams tangled with memories, Samuel's voice mixing with Caleb's laugh. Guilt nudging me awake just as warmth pulled me back under, and then my body started acting strange. I blamed stress at first, trouble sleeping, food tasting off. A tiredness that sank into my bones no matter how early I turned in. My emotions felt louder, everything landed harder than it should have. I told myself it was age, hormones, life, but somewhere deep down a quiet unease settled in. Like something inside me was shifting without my permission. Like routine, the very thing I'd built my peace on was starting to feel dangerous. And once routine cracks, everything underneath gets exposed. I ignored the signs longer than I should have. That's what women like me do. We push through, call it nerves, call it age, call it anything but the truth sitting right in front of us. The mornings were the worst. I'd wake up already tired, like sleep had become a chore instead of a gift. Some days the smell of coffee, my one dependable joy, turned my stomach so fast I had to lean on the counter until the wave passed. "Get it together, Loretta," I muttered to myself more than once. I skipped breakfast. Then lunch, told myself I'd eat later. Later never came. At the pantry I found myself sitting down more, pretending to organize donations just so I could catch my breath. Caleb noticed, of course he did. You all right? He asked one afternoon, his voice gentle but observant. You been looking a little worn out lately. I'm fine, I said too quickly, just one of those weeks. He didn't push. But his eyes stayed on me a second longer than usual. That night I stood in my bathroom staring at my reflection. Same face, same silver creeping into my hairline, same woman I'd been for years. So why did I feel like a stranger in my own skin? Then there was the dizziness. It hit me at the grocery store, fluorescent lights buzzing, aisles spinning. I grabbed the edge of the cart and breathed through it, pretending to study a shelf of cereal until the world steadied itself again. A younger woman passed me, belly rounded under her sweater, talking on her phone about baby names. Something twisted in my chest. I went home early and sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, hands folded in my lap like I was waiting for news I didn't want to hear. I thought about calling my daughter Denise. She's practical, straightforward, a nurse, the kind of woman who doesn't sugarcoat, but I didn't want logic yet, I wanted denial, so I made an appointment with my regular doctor instead. Told myself it was just to be safe, just routine, just a checkup. The waiting room felt smaller than usual, too bright, too quiet. The paper on the exam table crinkled under me like it was impatient. When the doctor asked me questions about fatigue, nausea, dizziness, his face grew more thoughtful by the minute. How long has this been going on? He asked. A few weeks, I said. Maybe longer, he nodded, tapping notes into his computer. We'll run a few tests. I laughed, light and dismissive. Doctor, I'm 61, whatever this is, I promise it ain't exciting. He didn't smile back. When he stepped out to wait for the results, the room went unbearably still. My heartbeat felt loud, heavy. I found myself thinking of Caleb, the way he listened, the way he stood close without crowding me, the way my body reacted to his presence like it remembered something my mind had forgotten. This doesn't make sense, I told myself, and yet when the doctor came back, he didn't sit right away. That's when I knew. Loretta, he said carefully, I want you to hear me before you react. My hands clenched in my lap. Because deep down, before he said anything else, my body had already told me the truth, and it was a truth that would change everything. I wish I could tell you I handled it with grace. That I sat there calm and composed, nodded politely, asked smart questions like a woman who's lived 6 decades should. That would be a lie. When the doctor said the words, my first reaction wasn't fear or tears. It was laughter. A sharp, startled sound that came out of me before I could stop it. You've got the wrong chart, I said. That's not possible. He stayed quiet, didn't rush me, just let the silence stretch until it settled heavy between us. Loretta, he said again, softer this time, the test is clear. Pregnant. That word felt foreign in my mouth, like a language I used to speak in another lifetime and had long since forgotten. I went through menopause years ago, I said. I raised my kids, I buried my husband, this part of my life is over. He folded his hands. It's rare, extremely rare, but not impossible. I stared at the wall behind him where a faded poster explained heart health for seniors. The irony nearly took me out. My hands started shaking then, not dramatic, just small tremors like my body was trying to catch up to the shock my mind was still dodging. I need you to understand, he continued, this would be considered high risk. We'll need to move carefully. High risk. At my age, everything felt high risk suddenly. My heart, my bones, my future, a baby inside me. I thought of Samuel. Thought of the life I'd already lived, the grief I'd survived, the quiet I'd earned. And then, against all reason, I thought of Caleb, not in a romantic way, not yet, just him, his presence, his steadiness. The way he looked at me like I was still fully here. How far along? I asked. He told me. The room tilted. I left the clinic in a fog, drove home on autopilot. Past streets I'd driven 1,000 times without seeing any of them. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a long time with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. I whispered, Lord, what are you doing? That evening I tried to act normal. I made soup I couldn't finish, watched TV I didn't hear, folded laundry that didn't need folding, and then the phone buzzed, a text from Caleb. You crossed my mind today, hope you're feeling better. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. I didn't respond, not because I didn't want to. What do you say when your life just split open? What do you do when the future you planned quietly steps aside for one you never imagined? I went to bed early, but sleep didn't come. I lay there listening to the house settle, one hand resting over my stomach without realizing I'd put it there. Nothing felt different, and yet everything was. By morning, denial was gone. All that was left was the question that scared me most: what happens next? I didn't tell Caleb first. That choice haunted me almost immediately. Instead, I called my daughter Denise the next morning, hands sweating so bad I nearly dropped the phone. Denise is the oldest, the responsible one, the fixer. If something's broken, she believes there's a plan to handle it, you just have to follow it. "Ma," she answered, "everything okay?" "No," I said, and then I stopped breathing for a second. Silence stretched. Denise knows my voice, knows when I'm dancing around something. "Where are you?" she asked. "At home. I'm coming." She arrived less than 40 minutes later, still in her scrubs, hair pulled back tight, concern written all over her face. She didn't even sit down at first, just stood in my living room like she was bracing for impact. "What's going on?" she asked. I told her, not dramatically, not gently, just straight out. Her face changed in stages: confusion, shock, then something like disbelief that bordered on anger, not at me, but at the universe. "You're sure?" she said finally. "Yes." "Did they repeat the test?" "Yes." She sat down hard on the couch. "Ma," she said slowly, carefully, like she was choosing every word with tweezers, this is not a normal situation. I know, you're 61, I know, this is high risk. Extremely high risk, I know that too." She rubbed her face with both hands and exhaled sharply. "Do you understand what this means?" "Yes," I said, "it means I'm pregnant. That's not what I meant." She looked up at me then, eyes shining. "It means complications, it means people judging you, it means the possibility that you might not be okay." There it was, the thing nobody wanted to say. "I might not be okay," I repeated quietly. The room went still. Denise's voice softened. "Who's the father?" I hesitated, and in that pause I realized how complicated my answer already was. "His name is Caleb," I said. "He's been helping at the pantry." Her eyebrows shot up. "The tall one?" "Yes." "How old is he?" "Mid-40s. She stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. "Does he know?" "No." She stood up and started pacing. Okay, one thing at a time. You need a specialist. You need monitoring, you need to think about." "I am thinking," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I've been thinking all night." She stopped pacing and looked at me. "I'm still a person," I said. "Not just a medical case." Her shoulders sagged. "I know," she whispered. I'm scared." "So am I." That was the moment something shifted between us, not broken, just stretched. Denise hugged me then, tight and trembling. "We'll figure this out," she said, "even if I don't understand it yet." After she left, the house felt too quiet. By afternoon, the town started noticing. Missed volunteer hours, Denise's car in my driveway. Whispered looks at the grocery store. Small towns sense disruption like dogs sense storms. And through all of it, my phone stayed silent. No message from Caleb, no call, and every hour that passed made the truth heavier in my chest. Because the next conversation would change more than just my life, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. I didn't plan the moment I told Caleb. It happened because avoiding it became harder than facing it. He showed up at the pantry that Friday like nothing in the world had shifted. Same quiet smile, same steady walk, same way of asking how my day was, like the answer mattered. "Hey," he said, setting down a box of canned vegetables. "You disappeared on us yesterday. I was gonna check in." My chest tightened. "I need to talk to you," I said. Something in my tone must have reached him because his smile faded just a little. "Okay," he said. "You want to step outside?" We sat on the concrete steps behind the building. The air was thick, heavy, with the kind of heat that makes everything feel slower and louder at the same time. I stared at my hands. They looked older than they had a week ago. "Caleb," I said, then stopped. Saying his name felt dangerous. Like once I spoke, there'd be no putting things back where they were. "Take your time," he said quietly. I took a breath, then another. "I went to the doctor." He nodded. "You okay?" "No." That single word cracked something open. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was heavy. He didn't speak right away, didn't interrupt. Just sat there staring straight ahead like his brain needed a second to catch up. Then he turned to me. "You're pregnant?" he asked, slow and careful. "Loretta, I know how old I am," I said. "I know how impossible it sounds." I didn't believe it either. His mouth opened, then closed. He ran a hand over his face. "How far along?" he asked. I told him. He let out a breath I didn't realize he'd been holding, and his voice dropped. It's mine, yes. That's when his eyes changed, not fear, not anger, something closer to awe. He stood up suddenly and started pacing, not fast, just restless, like energy had nowhere to go. I don't even have kids, he said. Never thought I would, never planned on it. I wasn't asking you to plan anything, I said softly. I just needed you to know. He stopped pacing and looked at me. You think I'd walk away? He asked. I didn't know what to think. He sat back down beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. I won't lie, he said. This scares the hell out of me, but not because of you. And not because of the baby. Then why? Because this matters. That landed harder than anything else he could have said. He reached for my hand. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know how people are gonna react. But I know I'm not disappearing. My eyes burned. I'm high risk, I said. The doctor made that very clear. I'll go to the appointments, he said without hesitation. All of them? You don't have to. I want to. We sat there as the sun dipped low, the world moving around us like nothing extraordinary was happening, but something was. Because in that moment, I realized the story wasn't just about me anymore. And once other people find out, they won't be nearly as gentle. News doesn't travel fast in small towns, it travels accurate. By Monday morning, people weren't asking if something was going on, they were just deciding what version they liked best. I noticed it at the grocery store first, the way conversations dipped when I walked past. The way eyes lingered a second too long on my midsection like they were expecting something to announce itself early. The way Miss Clara at checkout, who'd known me since I was 20, suddenly called me ma'am instead of Loretta. That hurt more than I expected. By Wednesday, the pantry felt different, not hostile, not openly rude, just watchful. Caleb felt it too. I could tell by the way his shoulders squared when people stared a little too hard. By how he stayed closer to me than usual, like proximity alone could shield us. I heard some things, he said quietly as we stocked shelves. Nothing specific, just noise. I figured, I replied. Because the truth was, once a woman like me steps outside the role people assigned her, widow, grandmother, church lady, they don't know where to put her anymore. And when people don't know where to put you, they try to push you back. The first comment came from church. A woman I'd prayed beside for years pulled me aside after service, her voice low and sweet like sugar over vinegar. Loretta, she said, I don't mean to pry, but folks are saying things. I'm sure they are. Well, she hesitated. At our age, appearances matter. There it was, not concern, not care, control. I'm not an appearance, I said calmly. I'm a person. She blinked, clearly unprepared for that answer. By the time Sunday rolled around again, the pastor asked to have a conversation. That conversation was careful, polite, disguised as concern, but underneath it was the same message dressed in better clothes. This makes people uncomfortable. I walked out before he finished. That night, sitting on my porch with the cicadas screaming their opinions into the dark, I finally let myself feel it all. The judgment, the loneliness, the fear. Caleb sat beside me, his arm resting against mine. You okay? He asked. I didn't realize how invisible I'd been, I said, until I stopped behaving. He nodded. People like predictable. I used to be that. You still are, he said, just not quiet anymore. I laughed, a tired laugh. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about age or pregnancy or scandal. It was about a woman refusing to disappear politely. And that made people nervous. Because if I could break the rules this late in life, what did that mean for the rules they were still following? The question came from my son Marcus. Not gently, not cruelly, just direct. He called late one evening after the news had finally reached him the long way around through cousins, church friends, and a neighbor who thought whispering made things polite. Ma, he said, skipping pleasantries, are you sure this is a good idea? I closed my eyes. Marcus has always been my realist, the one who weighs outcomes before emotions. The one who asks the hard question everybody else dances around. I don't know, I said honestly. He exhaled. That's not what I needed to hear. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that hums in your ear. You know I love you, he continued. But this is a lot. People are talking, the doctors are worried, and his voice cracked. I don't want to lose you. That landed deeper than judgment ever could. I'm still here, I said softly. For now, he replied. But what about later? What about when the baby's 10, 15? What if something happens? There it was, the question nobody asks out loud. What if you don't live long enough to finish this story? After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table long past midnight, staring at nothing. Fear crept in the way it always does, quiet, convincing. What if he was right? What if love wasn't enough? What if choosing this child meant choosing risk, not just for me, but for everyone connected to me? The next day, the doctor's office called. They wanted to move my appointment sooner. That word, sooner, echoed. At the clinic, the specialist was kind but thorough. Charts, numbers, probabilities laid out without drama. You need to think carefully, she said. This will require monitoring, rest, and support. Emotionally and physically, support. I thought of Caleb waiting outside, of his steady presence, of his willingness to stand in the fire with me. I also thought of the looks, the whispers, the weight this decision placed on everyone I loved. That night, I asked Caleb the hardest question I'd asked anyone in years. If I told you I was scared enough to walk away, would you hate me? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I'd be hurt, but I'd understand. I just wouldn't stop caring. I cried then, because caring, real caring, doesn't trap you, it gives you room to choose. And in that space I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. No matter what I decided, someone would be disappointed. The only question left was whether I could live with disappointing myself. The twist didn't come from the doctor, it didn't come from the town, it didn't even come from my children. It came from my own body. The morning everything changed, I woke up before dawn with a tightness in my chest that felt different from fear. Not sharp, not painful, just heavy, like something pressing inward from the inside. Caleb was asleep beside me on top of the covers, fully dressed the way he always was when he stayed over, careful and respectful, like he didn't want to take more space than I offered. I sat up slowly, one hand instinctively going to my stomach. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel wonder, I felt clarity. Later that morning at the specialist's office, the room felt colder than before. The machines hummed, the nurse avoided my eyes just a second too long, the doctor came in holding my chart, lips pressed together. Loretta, she said, we need to talk. I knew then, not everything, but enough. The pregnancy was progressing, but my body wasn't handling it the way it should. Blood pressure rising, heart strain, signs that this wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. Not eventually. Now. If this continues, she said carefully, you're looking at a serious risk to your life. The words didn't crash into me, they settled like a truth that had been waiting patiently. Caleb's hand tightened around mine. What are the options? He asked. The doctor answered honestly, no dramatics, no pushing, monitoring, medication, possible early intervention, and one more option. The room went quiet. I asked the question before anyone else could. If I continue, what are the odds I make it through? She didn't rush her answer. I can't promise, she said, and I won't lie. I nodded. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. The road stretched out, empty and long, like it was giving us time to catch up to ourselves. That afternoon, I sat alone on my porch while Caleb ran errands, listening to the wind move through the trees. And I thought about the story everyone else thought this was. The scandal, the surprise, the miracle, but stories aren't lived from the outside. They're lived from the center where consequences breathe. I realized then that this wasn't about proving anything, not about defying age, not about silencing judgment, not about rewriting expectations. It was about responsibility and love. Real love doesn't just ask, what do I want? It asks, what can I carry without breaking? When Caleb came back, I already knew what I needed to say, but saying it would change everything. I asked Caleb to sit with me on the porch. Not inside, not in the bedroom where emotions echo off the walls. Outside, where the air could carry some of the weight away. The sun was sliding low, painting everything gold, the kind of light that makes even hard moments look gentle. I need to tell you something, I said. He didn't interrupt, just nodded. I don't think I can do this, I continued. Not like we hoped. His jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. The doctor was honest, I said. This pregnancy is pushing my body past what it can safely handle. I can keep going for a while, but the odds don't favor me. He swallowed. So what are you saying? I'm saying I have to choose life, I said. And I don't mean just mine, I mean the life I've already lived. The people who already depend on me. Tears slipped down my face before I could stop them. I wanted to be brave, I whispered. I wanted to be miraculous, but I don't want my children burying me because I was trying to prove something. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground. "I don't want you gone," he said quietly. Neither did I. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he reached for my hand. "If this is what you need to do," he said, "I'm with you. Not because it's easy, but because it's yours." That broke me, because support doesn't always look like agreement. Sometimes it looks like standing still while someone lets go. The next few days blurred together, appointments, conversations, tears that came in waves instead of storms. Denise cried but didn't argue. Marcus hugged me harder than he ever had. The town stopped whispering once they realized there'd be no spectacle to feed on. And then one quiet morning, I walked into the clinic with my head high and my heart heavy. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt honest. Afterward, recovery was slow but steady. My body thanked me in small ways: easier breathing, steadier steps, clearer mornings. Caleb stayed, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, out of care, but something between us shifted, not broken, just changed. And change doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes it means truth finally has room to breathe. People think grief always announces itself with noise, crying spells, broken routines, days you can't get out of bed. But the kind of grief I carried after that decision was quieter. It showed up in pauses, in moments where I reached for something that wasn't there anymore, a future I'd briefly held in my hands, then gently set back down. My body healed faster than my heart. Physically, I felt stronger with every passing week. My blood pressure steadied. The constant exhaustion lifted. I could walk the block again without stopping halfway. I could breathe without feeling like my chest was wrapped too tight. Emotionally, it was slower. I'd wake up some mornings with the faintest sense that I'd forgotten something important. Not panic, not pain, just absence. Caleb noticed before I said anything. "You're quieter," he said one evening as we washed dishes together. "I'm listening," I replied. "To what?" "To myself." That was the truth. Because after the noise fades, the opinions, the urgency, the fear, you're left with your own voice. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't drowning it out with duty or routine. Caleb and I didn't rush to define what we were. We didn't need to. Some nights he stayed, some nights he went home. We talked more than we touched, learned each other in a way that wasn't fueled by adrenaline or crisis. One afternoon, I caught him fixing a loose board on my porch without asking. "Planning to move in?" I teased. He smiled. "Just making sure what's here lasts." That stayed with me. The town slowly returned to normal, or at least its version of normal. New gossip took center stage, another scandal, another opinion. I learned something important during that time: people move on faster than you expect, and that's okay. Church felt different when I went back, not hostile, just distant. Some folks avoided eye contact, others offered awkward kindness. I accepted both without explanation because I didn't owe anyone one. What surprised me most was the peace. Not relief, not happiness, peace. I didn't regret my choice. That doesn't mean I didn't feel the loss. You can hold both, grief and certainty, sadness and strength. I began volunteering again, but differently. Less obligation, more intention. I laughed more easily, slept more deeply, and slowly, without ceremony, I started trusting myself again. There's a version of me that existed before all this. She was careful, predictable, so well-behaved she almost disappeared inside her own life. I met a different woman on the other side of everything. She wasn't louder. She wasn't braver in the way people clap for. She was truer. I saw her one morning while tying my shoes, really saw her, reflected faintly in the hallway mirror. Same lines around the eyes. Same hands that had held babies and grief and grocery bags and worry, but her posture was different, straighter, like she trusted herself to stand. Caleb noticed it too. "You don't apologize as much anymore," he said one afternoon as we walked the long way home from the park. "I didn't realize I was," I replied. He smiled. "You were, for existing." That hit. Because somewhere along the way, I'd learned to shrink my wants so they wouldn't inconvenience anyone. Learned to call it maturity. Learned to confuse silence with wisdom. This experience, painful, beautiful, terrifying, stripped that lie away. I started saying no without explaining, started saying yes without guilt, started choosing rest over approval. Caleb and I talked about the future in softer terms now, not plans, possibilities. We weren't rushing toward anything. We weren't clinging either. Love, I learned, doesn't always need permanence to be real. Sometimes it just needs honesty. One evening, Denise came by with my granddaughter. She watched us laughing on the porch, the three of us sharing ice cream like nothing heavy had ever passed through that space. Later, as she helped me clean up, she said quietly, "I was scared I'd lose you." "I was scared too," I admitted. "But you didn't," she said. "And I didn't lose you either." That felt like grace. Marcus called more often, less worried. More present. Even church softened, not because they understood, but because time dulls certainty. And me, I stopped needing to be understood. I started thinking about legacy, not the kind etched in stone, the kind passed in stories. In how you teach people to treat themselves. I realized something then. This wasn't a story about age or scandal or even pregnancy. It was a story about a woman remembering she still belonged to herself. And that truth, once reclaimed, doesn't fade. These days, my mornings are quiet again, but it's a different kind of quiet than before, not the kind that swallows you whole, not the kind that hums with everything you never said. This quiet feels earned. I sit on my porch with a cup of tea instead of coffee now. My stomach never quite forgave me for those months, and I watch the sun climb slow over the rooftops. Same street, same trees. Same town that once felt too small to hold me. Funny how places don't change. People do. Caleb still comes by, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just with conversation, sometimes with silence we don't feel the need to fill. We never labeled what we are, and that feels right. Not every love story needs a title, some just need honesty. Every now and then I catch myself wondering, not in regret, in acknowledgement, wondering who that child might have been. What laugh they'd have had, whether they'd inherited my stubborn streak or Caleb's quiet patience. I don't push those thoughts away, I let them pass through me like weather, because honoring something doesn't mean clinging to it. It means making space for it without letting it take you under. People still ask questions, fewer now and softer, some with curiosity, some with judgment dressed up as concern. I answer when I feel like it. Most days I don't. I've learned something important at this age. You don't owe your story to anyone who won't carry it with care. My body bears the memory of that season, my heart does too, but neither feel broken, they feel informed. I go to church when I want, I skip it when I don't, I laugh loud, I rest without guilt, I say no and mean it, I say yes and don't apologize afterward. And sometimes, late at night when the house settles and the world goes still, I place a hand over my chest and feel my heartbeat steady, strong, present. That's when I know I chose life, not just survival, not just safety, life. The kind where you listen to yourself, the kind where you stop disappearing politely, the kind where silence doesn't scare you anymore. Because silence, when you finally make peace with it, can sound a lot like freedom. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Speech Balloon, tell us in the comments, do you believe choosing peace is sometimes braver than holding on? Your voice matters here.